At what point would you say that the statement that only metadata was being captured, at what point in time was that false?
2002.
From 2002 on,
Right.
that has been false.
Right.
And is this widely known even within the NSA community?
Early on, there were only a few people who knew about it, and they only had maybe 200 or 300 at most of the people were involved in it early on. And then it expanded. I think the latest numbers, according to the NSA IG's office, right, was there about 2,000 to 3,000 people now. At that time, 2009, when he did his report.
Who are fully aware of the scope of this?
Right.
Who are fully aware?
Well, they at least know part of it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because he talked about them breaking it down into the metadata analysis team for emails, and the metadata analysis team for phone calls, and then the content analysis team. And that became the advanced analytic division, those three components. And I maintain that was another bureaucratic blunder, because what they're doing is taking the same problem. I mean, it's like you would make a phone call to somebody, but you all might also email them. But you all also talk and send emails. So there's content, there's metadata for emails, and there's metadata for phone. It's all the same problem, but they've taken that problem and divided it into three parts. So now what that does is analytically that creates an integration problem. That is, how can you understand that data unless you can pull it all together? That means you've got to unify the effort across those groups. That's a barrier, okay? That's a barrier to success. You don't subdivide the same problem, you consolidate it so that analysts can see the entire problem as it's evolving.
And I believe you said something about that perhaps the major problem at this point is that these analysts are confronted with such a tremendous volume of data that they're not as effective as they could be.
Yeah, that's right, because what's happening with the philosophy of take everything, copy everything you can, is it means you accumulate massive amounts of data. And if your analysts are doing just what they've been doing down through the years, which is use Google-type queries, where they use combinations of words, phrases, or so on, then you can get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of returns on every query you make. So if you go in for look into the database of every day's take coming in on the orders of tens of billions of things, items, emails, phone calls, all that stuff coming in, and you do your queries just like you would with Google, you could get thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of returns every day on every day's input, which is impossible for people to get through. There's no way that any person could physically do that. That's why they're having such difficulty finding things, stopping things, recognizing things, because they're buried in data. So the point was, and then that really is that they're starting to get the idea that that's really what they've done to themselves. And so that's why they issued the White House Big Data Initiative back in early 2012, I think it was, where they say they're soliciting industry to come up with algorithms that can go through massive amounts or big data and figure out what in that data is important to look at, so they can take it out and give it to people. Well, I mean, there are ways to do that up front. That's what we were doing 15 years ago.
And succinctly, what are those ways?
It's using the metadata to define communities and zones of suspicion around those communities, so you have a finite set of targets you're looking at. And then have other properties like, and I've said this publicly any number of times, things like people going to jihadi sites or sites advocating violence against the West. If you have people visiting them over and over again, that throws a light of suspicion on them. You have to look at them to weed them out as being active or not, or being radicalized or not. Or if you have something like a cell phone and you're running around the mountains of Afghanistan or Pakistan, or you're in the jungles of Colombia, you could be considered a terrorist or a dope smuggler, or even a terrorist down in the jungles of Colombia. They have the FARC down there. In case you can say that these are potentials, right? And so you have to throw them into the bag of suspicion, the zone of suspicion. And for those reasons and other kinds of reasons you would have to build up that zone of suspicion, but it's a very targeted set. And you're doing it for a reason. And you need to resolve them. That because you fall into the zone of suspicion doesn't mean you are automatically on the no-fly list, or you're not on a watch list, or you're not on a kill list. You don't do that. You throw them on that list to say these people need to be resolved one way or another. Are they or are they not a part of this illegal activity? Right? And you resolve them one way or the other, one at a time, or however many ways you could do that. And there's some ways to automate that process too.
But just to be clear about this, you are not advocating a weakening of, let's call it, America's capability to remain free.
No, absolutely not. I want them to do their job and do it right, and I want them to be effective. Right now, they're not being effective because they're not doing the proper job. They're wasting their time on everybody in the world that's irrelevant to any of the criminal activity or any of the potential threats.
In their stress about getting everything, collecting everything all the time.
Yeah, that varies everybody, and that's they figure that if they get it, then they'll have everything, and so it makes them feel comfortable. We've got it all, so somewhere in there we've got the right data, and we'll figure it out someday. But they've never been able to do it before the fact. The whole point of intelligence is not a forensics operation; that's a policing operation, right? Intelligence, the purpose and function of intelligence is to predict potential future threats, intentions, and capabilities of potential enemies. So that you're there predicting in advance before a terrorist attack occurs or before dope is smuggled or whatever, so that people in authority and in positions of power can make decisions to interrupt it, interfere with it, stop it, divert it, whatever. So that they have a chance, that they first of all know it's coming, and then they have a chance to take an action to stop it. That's what intelligence is supposed to do. This business of going through after the attack and saying, oh, well, we had this on him and this on him, and that's all very well and good, but that's a forensics job. That's policing. That's not intelligence. I want them to do the intelligence job of predicting intentions and capabilities of foreign threats.
And right now, you don't think we're really getting our money's worth?
Absolutely not.
How much is being spent in this effort?
For the intelligence community, it's over $100 billion a year. So, on the order of $70 billion of that is used in contracts too, every year.
Is used in contracts?
Contracts.
Mm-hmm.
With the Booz Allen, TRW, all the big boys, and some small ones too.
So how much do you think they should be getting if they were operating
I would
efficiently?
cut the budget to $65 billion and force them to do the right things. Limit what they could do so that now I have to focus on not domestic, but focus on foreign threats and do the focused attack on data selection, not collection. It's not the idea to collect all the data, it's to select all the right data. That's the issue.
Do you think that this is just some sort of accident, some sort of financial collaboration between contractors and the government, or do you think there's something more nefarious going on, like a deliberate attack on the freedoms that this nation was founded on?
I think it's a mixture of both of those. Primarily, I think the motivation is from money. And how do you build a big empire? Well, if you want to build a big empire, an intelligence empire, you have to collect a lot of data, because then you have to find a place to store it. You've got to build those places to store it. Then you have to hire people to manage the storage. Then you have to hire other people, the computer programmers, to help manage the flow of data back and forth and index it and make sure it's stored and backed up and all that stuff. And then you have to have other sets of programmers to come in and write programs to do analysis of that data. And you have to have more analysts because you got more data. So it builds up the contracting empire, and it builds up the budget, and it builds up the government empire. So that's an empire building process. And I
But
think
you-
that's what I think that was the primary motivator.
But you certainly can't deny that under the current conditions of the past couple of years that somebody's not operating in the best interest of the United States.